You ever think about, really think about what it would feel like to have your money actually working for you? Like, to give you real control over your time and your choices? That's really at the heart of financial freedom, isn't it? And it's something that, we know a lot of you are really thinking about, really trying to figure out. So today, we're going deep, deep, deep into a roadmap laid out by someone who's actually done it, someone who's built a life where money is no longer this, daily constraint.
Absolutely. We're diving into the world of Mark Tilbury, who many of you probably already know from YouTube. And what's so fascinating about Mark's story and why it probably resonates with so many of you is that he didn't start out with any special advantages.
No, not at all.
Dropping out of school,
Yeah.
making, was it $2 an hour as a carpentry apprentice,
Yeah.
building, get this, wooden trash cans. I mean, to talk about a real climb from the bottom.
Yeah. It's a pretty humble beginning. But despite all that, he achieved, millionaire status and that kind of freedom that comes with it all before he even hit 30. I mean, it really begs the question, in today's world, is that kind of transformation, that financial transformation, still even possible for the average person?
Right. Is that just a pipe dream now?
Well, that's the very question Tilbury tackles head on in his video, My Honest Advice to Someone Who Wants Financial Freedom. And his answer, which is pretty encouraging, is a resounding yes. It's a yes, but with a big caveat.
With a big butt.
Yeah. You need a plan, a well-defined plan. And that's what we're going to break down for you in this deep dive. Think of it as your fast track to really understanding the actionable strategies that Tilbury outlines. We're going to dissect that roadmap, pull out the key steps that he believes can empower anyone listening, yeah, you listening right now, to carve out your own path to financial independence no matter where you're starting from.
I love it. Let's do it.
All right, let's jump right into step 1, which Tilbury calls Find Your Freedom Figure. Now, this might sound a bit abstract at first, but it's really the foundation of this whole thing. So what exactly are we talking about here?
So it's your personal magic number, right? It's the total amount of money you'd need to have invested where the passive income it generates just covers all your living expenses comfortably, indefinitely, forever. So you don't have to work for a paycheck ever again.
Freedom.
Exactly. But here's the catch, and Tilbury really emphasizes this. This figure, it's intensely personal. What signifies financial freedom for you could be totally different for me or for anyone else listening.
Right. So the first real task here is to set your own financial freedom baseline. And that means taking an honest look at what kind of lifestyle you actually want. So are we talking frequent international trips? Are we talking a fancy sports car? Maybe a luxurious apartment in the city?
Right. Are we living in Miami? Are we living in London?
Exactly. And Tilbury is quick to point out the more ambitious your lifestyle goals, the bigger that freedom figure has got to be. And obviously, the more effort it's going to take to get there.
Right. And I thought it was really interesting, his personal take on this whole thing, right? He values the freedom, like the actual freedom from needing to earn money, more than just constantly chasing some ultra-luxurious life. He even had this rule for himself where he only increases his lifestyle, like the quality of it, a little bit each year.
I like that.
It's a really grounded and I think a much more sustainable way to think about it.
It definitely takes some of the pressure off, right? Like, you don't need to become a billionaire overnight. To give you a more concrete idea, Tilbury walks through a pretty relatable example of how someone in their 20s might figure out their annual living costs. So he looks at things like housing, using Miami and London as benchmarks, and estimates around $30,000 a year for a one-bedroom apartment. Then there's transportation, and here he gets a little aspirational, right? He uses a Porsche 911 as the example.
Okay, not bad.
Yeah, but he factors in all the costs. So fuel, maintenance, insurance, even potential financing costs if you're not buying it outright. And that comes out to about $4,125 per year.
And he's not forgetting about travel, right?
Yeah.
Which I think is really important.
Absolutely. He knows that younger generations often prioritize experiences, so he includes an estimate for 3 kind of mid-range vacations per year at about $5,000. But he does say that could easily double if you're traveling with a partner.
Right. Makes sense. So then we get to the less glamorous but essential stuff.
Oh, yeah. Got to pay the bills. Utilities, for a city apartment, he estimates at about $3,000 a year. Then there's food. He budgets about $5,000 annually for a mix of cooking at home and eating out. You got to have some balance, right? He also includes U.S. health insurance, which, as you know, is kind of a unique beast, at around $2,500 per year. And finally, leisure, gym memberships, nights out with friends, those little spontaneous treats. He suggests allocating about $4,000 a year for that.
Okay, so that's a pretty comprehensive breakdown.
Yeah, it's pretty detailed. And when you add up all those example costs, Tilbury comes to an annual total of $75,200. Now, this is where the famous Rule of 25 comes in.
Ah, yes, the rule of 25. You want to explain how that works?
As the Rule of 25, it's kind of a bedrock principle in the world of financial independence planning. It basically says you take your total annual living expenses and you multiply that number by 25. And that gives you the total investment portfolio you'd need to theoretically live off of indefinitely without ever touching the principal.
Right, so you never actually spend that initial investment.
Exactly. So in Tilbury's example, that's $75,200 times 25, which comes out to a cool $1,880,000.
Yeah, I mean, that's a significant chunk of change, no doubt.
Yeah.
But the idea behind it is pretty solid. Tilbury uses this great analogy of a golden goose.
I love the golden goose analogy.
Right, so the goose lays these golden eggs, which in this case are your passive income. And the idea is that your total invested capital, as long as you're managing it wisely, is going to generate enough returns each year to cover all your expenses without you ever having to touch the goose itself.
Yeah, it keeps laying those golden eggs.
Exactly. And this rule, it kind of assumes you can get an average annual return on your investments of at least 4%, which, as Tilbury points out, while past performance doesn't guarantee future results, the historical average annual return of the S&P 500 over the last decade has actually been way higher.
Way higher, like 12 to 14%.
Yeah, exactly. And he even highlights this really compelling historical data that shows that no one, literally no one, has ever lost money by consistently buying and holding an S&P 500 index fund for longer than 20 years. I mean, that's pretty powerful.
It's a pretty strong argument for long-term investing.
For sure.
So for those of you who might be thinking, okay, that theoretical figure is interesting and all, but how do I actually start investing in something like the S&P 500? Tilbury offers a really accessible entry point, and that's modern investing apps. You know, things like Trading 212. He explains that within these platforms, you can easily search for and find an S&P 500 ETF, which basically lets you invest in a basket of all the top 500 publicly traded companies in the U.S., giving you instant diversification.
Yeah, and it takes the guesswork out of picking individual stocks.
Totally. And one of the most important things he emphasizes is that these platforms, like Trading 212, let you invest in what are called fractional shares.
That's a game changer.
It is. It means you don't need to have like hundreds or even thousands of dollars to buy a single share of a company. You can start investing with much smaller amounts. It opens up the stock market to a lot more people.
Exactly. And for anyone just starting out, Tilbury really recommends this strategy called dollar cost averaging. It's a simple approach where you invest a fixed amount of money at regular intervals, like weekly or monthly, no matter what the market's doing.
You just keep investing consistently.
Exactly. It helps to kind of average out your purchase price over time. And it also avoids that whole risky game of trying to time the market.
And it takes some of the emotion out of it, which can be a big hurdle for new investors.
For sure. And he even mentions how some platforms like Trading 212 have features like pies that let you automate this whole process.
So you set it and forget it.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
Makes it even easier to stay consistent.
All right, so we figured out how to calculate our freedom figure, and we have a practical way to start investing. Now let's move on to step 2, which Tilbury cleverly calls Act Your Life.
I love that.
This section is packed with actionable strategies to help you reach that freedom figure faster by really getting strategic with your savings.
Right. And Tilbury starts this off by really encouraging you to look at where your money's going right now. Like, where are you spending unnecessarily? He knows that a lot of the typical money-saving advice out there can feel pretty generic. So he focuses on what he calls smart hacks.
Smart hacks, I like it.
Right. Practical adjustments you can make without completely upending your lifestyle.
Yeah, no one wants to live like a monk.
Exactly. So first up is car hacking.
Okay, car hacking. For those who are picturing like breaking into cars or something, that's not what we're talking about.
No, nothing illegal here.
So what's the main idea behind car hacking?
He challenges that whole image we see, especially on social media, of everyone driving brand new, super expensive cars that they're financing with like massive loans.
Yeah.
He actually brings up some pretty interesting stats. The average monthly car payment in the U.S. right now is crazy high, and a huge number of Americans are carrying car debt.
Yeah, it's a trap a lot of people fall into.
Totally. So his advice is to avoid that trap altogether. Instead of buying new, he suggests car hacking by going for a high-quality used car, one that's already gone through its biggest depreciation hit. The idea is you can drive that car for a few years and then probably sell it for close to what you paid for it. So you avoid those huge monthly payments and all that interest.
Makes a lot of sense. Next up is brand hacking. This one seems pretty self-explanatory.
It is. It's basically just choosing generic or store brand products over those big name brands.
To save money. Right.
Exactly. But without sacrificing quality. Tilbury even points to research that suggests you could save like a huge percentage on certain types of products just by making this one simple switch.
Wow.
He gives a really relatable example, comparing a popular breakfast cereal to its generic counterpart. The ingredients are often pretty much identical, the taste is very similar, but the savings can be huge. And sometimes, as he points out, you even get more product for your money.
And those little savings, when you add them up over time, can really make a difference.
Absolutely.
All right, so then we get to house hacking.
This one's interesting.
It's definitely more creative than just downsizing your apartment.
Totally. Tilbury lays out a couple of different strategies here. One is buying a duplex or a property that has some extra rentable space, and then renting out the other unit or units. So the rental income you get can then cover a big chunk, maybe even all of your mortgage payments,
So you're basically living for free.
and building equity at the same time.
Yeah.
He also talks about this Airbnb hack, where you rent a nice apartment in a good location and then sublet it on Airbnb for part of the month. You could potentially cover your entire rent this way. He gives an example of someone near London Bridge where they were renting an apartment for a certain amount per month, and they only needed to rent it out for like 10 days to cover their own rent.
That's pretty clever.
It is. But he stresses you got to pick a desirable property, and you got to get your landlords okay.
Right, you got to do it legally. What's the next hack on the list?
Next up, we've got tax hacking. And Tilbury is quick to point out, this isn't about doing anything illegal or shady. It's about legally and ethically minimizing your taxes.
Smart.
So he mentions things like taking advantage of deductions if you have a small business or a side hustle, like claiming expenses for your home office, your internet, or even business travel. He also highlights the big advantages of using tax-advantaged savings accounts. Things like the ISA in the UK or the Roth IRA in the US, where your investments can grow without being taxed.
I mean, that's a pretty big deal.
It is. The main idea here is to understand the tax rules that apply to you
Yeah.
and then use them to your advantage. You got to pay what you owe, but you don't have to pay more than that.
Right. No need to give the government extra money. And the final hack in this section focuses on negotiation.
Yeah, getting those good deals.
Exactly. Tilbury points out that a lot of things are actually negotiable, especially big purchases like cars. He says you should never accept the sticker price. Do your research, understand the market value, get quotes from multiple dealers, and even use online car buying services to get a baseline for what the car is really worth.
So you have some leverage when you walk into the dealership.
Exactly. He also mentions that you might have more negotiating power at the end of the month when salespeople are trying to hit their targets.
Makes sense.
All right, so we've covered a ton of strategies to boost our savings. Step 3 takes us to a financial tool that often gets a bad rap: credit cards.
Credit cards. Yeah, they can be a scary topic for a lot of people.
They can, but Tilbury challenges that whole idea that credit cards are inherently bad. He argues that if you use them responsibly and strategically, they can actually be a really valuable tool for building a strong credit history.
Right, it's all about how you use them.
So why is a good credit score so important in the long run?
A good credit score basically tells lenders that you're financially responsible. It shows them you can be trusted to repay your debts. So a higher score can mean you get better borrowing terms, like lower interest rates on things like mortgages, which can save you a ton of money over time.
But on the flip side, if you have a bad credit score, it can really hurt you.
It can. You might end up with higher interest rates, or you might even get denied for loans altogether.
Yeah, not good.
So Tilbury's advice is to use credit cards to build your credit, but use them responsibly. Keep your balance low and pay it off in full every single month so you're not racking up interest charges.
That's the key. So step 4 focuses on actively boosting our income by creating another income stream.
Multiple streams of income.
Why does Tilbury emphasize this so much for achieving financial freedom?
He uses this really good analogy. He says, think of your income sources like the legs of a stool. If you're relying on just one income stream, like your job, that's a one-legged stool. It's super unstable. If that one leg gives out, like if you lose your job, your whole financial world comes crashing down.
You fell flat on your face.
Exactly. And he points out that the old idea of having a job for life, that's gone. It's pretty common for people to have multiple jobs throughout their careers now.
So having multiple income streams, whether it's from side hustles or investments, is like adding more legs to that stool. It makes you a lot more financially stable.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And when it comes to starting a side hustle, what kind of things does Tilbury suggest?
He recommends using skills and expertise that you already have. That way, you can start earning income without having to spend a bunch of time and money learning something brand new.
That makes sense.
He gives some examples like affiliate marketing, freelancing in your field, starting an e-commerce business, or even doing local services
Like what?
like window cleaning, car detailing, things like that. But the main principle, he says, is that the more value you can consistently provide to others, the more you're going to earn. He also addresses some of the common objections that people have, like feeling too busy or not having enough money to start or not knowing how. He points out that most people actually have a lot more free time than they think.
Right. If you really track how you're spending your time.
Exactly. So he basically frames it as, if you're not taking action, maybe you don't really want financial freedom that badly.
That's a good point.
It's a bit of a tough love approach, but maybe that's what some people need to hear. So now we're saving smarter, we're earning more. Step 5 is where the magic of compounding really kicks in. It's called use money for its true function, expansion.
Expansion, I like it.
So what's the big idea here?
Tilbury draws this distinction between how different economic groups view money. He says people who are struggling financially tend to see money as just a way to cover their immediate expenses, their basic needs.
Just to survive.
Exactly. People in the middle class might focus on using money to build credit so they can buy bigger things with debt, like a house or a car.
They're kind of stuck in that cycle.
Yeah. But he argues that people who build real lasting wealth understand that the true purpose of money is to make more money.
To expand.
Right. So how do we actually put this idea of using money for expansion into practice?
So once you start generating extra income from your side hustles and eventually from your main income, Tilbury says you should start channeling those funds into creating passive income streams.
So your money is making money for you, even when you're not actively working.
Yeah, that's the dream.
He stresses that this is how wealthy people stay wealthy. They keep their money working for them. He even shares his own experience of hitting a limit on how many hours he could physically work, doing all those different things, and realizing that he needed to start investing his earnings if he wanted to achieve real financial leverage.
It's about working smarter, not harder. So what are some specific investment avenues that Tilbury recommends for this expansion phase?
Well, he circles back to the stock market, specifically the S&P 500 index fund, accessed through those user-friendly platforms like Trading 212. He likes it because it's accessible, it has a low barrier to entry, and you can even practice with a demo account before you invest real money.
Risk-free practice.
Exactly. He also mentions that he personally invests heavily in the S&P 500 because it's so diversified and has such a strong historical track record. He does touch on cryptocurrency, Bitcoin, and Ethereum specifically, acknowledging their potential for big growth, but also highlighting the fact that they're riskier.
You could win big or you could lose big.
Exactly. So he suggests maybe allocating a small percentage of your portfolio, like 5%, to crypto as a potential high reward, but also high risk investment.
Gotcha.
And then he talks about real estate as the ultimate wealth builder. But of course, that usually requires a bigger upfront investment. He brings up that house hacking strategy we talked about earlier, and also mentions building a portfolio of rental properties as a really powerful way to generate wealth over the long term.
Okay, so to sum it all up, we've covered a ton of ground here based on Mark Tilbury's advice. We started by defining your personal financial freedom target. Then we looked at some really clever and practical ways to maximize your savings, how to use credit cards strategically, the importance of building multiple income streams, and finally, the crucial step of using your money to fuel more growth through investment.
It's a holistic approach.
It is. And the main message throughout all of this, the thing we really want you to take away, is that achieving financial freedom, it's not some unattainable dream. It's a real, tangible goal that anyone can achieve.
If you're willing to put in the work.
Exactly. If you're willing to create a plan, take consistent action, and think long-term, it's about following that step-by-step approach that Tilbury outlines. So as you're listening to this, think about which of these steps really resonates with you right now. What can you realistically start doing, even if it's just a small thing, today? Maybe it's taking a hard look at your car situation, or maybe it's exploring a side hustle using skills you already have. Or maybe it's just finally sitting down and calculating your own freedom figure.
That's a great first step.
It all starts with taking that first step.
This has been an awesome deep dive into Mark Tilbury's framework for achieving financial freedom. And if you found this breakdown helpful and you want to dive even deeper into his specific advice or discover more content that can help you on your journey to financial understanding and independence, we encourage you to check out our YouTube channel, Deep Dive Cuttlefish. You'll find Mark Tilbury's full video there, my honest advice to someone who wants financial freedom, along with tons of other analyses and insights to help you navigate the path to financial well-being. And we'd love for you to subscribe to Deep Dive Cuttlefish so you don't miss out on future deep dives like this one.